Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today I gotta talk to you guys about this scene from Law Order SVU from an episode called Truth Embargo that aired January 25th of 2024, so maybe almost a month ago at the time that I'm putting out this video, because it's so absurd and so ridiculous, but it is serving a propagandist-like purpose in that it's trying to convince you that this is a reasonable position for somebody who is the victim of rape and or sexual assault to take if the person who committed that crime against them happens to be a black teenager. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. So just real quick, for those of you who don't have any context for Law & Order, which I can't imagine that you wouldn't have at least heard of it, but whatever, I'm going to do it anyway. Law & Order is a procedural show that is actually very pro-police, or historically has been very pro-police, throughout the entirety of its run. But it also has a bunch of derivative series, and one of the more popular derivative series is Law & Order SVU, Special Victims Unit, which specifically deals with the victims of sexual crimes. Now, to be clear to those of you out there in the audience, I am not a Law & Order watcher. I'm not a Law & Order viewer. In fact, one of the things that I found absurd when I was going to school for criminal justice is how many people in my school that were actually getting an education in criminal justice in the real world were into these kind of TV series related to crime and all that, even though they're not realistic at all whatsoever. I think that one of the characters in this particular show has something like a 98% conviction rate for sexual crimes, and that's just not something that exists in reality. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. These cases are often incredibly difficult to prove, and the idea that a bunch of aspiring people would be inspired by this fiction, this very pro-police officer, pro-prosecutor fiction, to me, it's just absurd. So I was just never into it as somebody who was always interested in a realistic take on the criminal justice system. However, they recently put out an episode because, like every series in this genre, they're pivoting into the woke a little bit, talking about the other side of the equation. And the scene that is drawing so much controversy is of this lesbian woman who was raped by a black teenager who is considering not identifying him, not testifying against him, due to the fact that she has white privilege and that innocent angel baby boy rapist would not do well in prison because he's such an innocent angel baby, and oh my god, the system is so harsh and the systemic inequality and all of that. Let me play the clips for you so you can see them for yourself.
But Natalie, Jay Watson raped you.
You think I forgot? How could I? This entire trial has been an exercise in reminding me.
And this is your chance to do something about it.
I am going to. Believe me. Because I can. I can afford therapy. I have that luxury. And maybe one day I'll be okay.
So again, this is only a 50-second clip. There's obviously a full episode that you guys can watch if you want. I gave the title of it. It's Truth Embargo. You can find it on a bunch of streaming services. But as you can see, the setup to this is you have these two individuals trying to get this woman to identify the rapist in court, the committer of this heinous crime, and she doesn't want to do so. And she says, listen, I'm going to do something about it because I can afford it. I can do the trauma therapy and all that stuff because I am a white woman of privilege. However, this innocent black angel rapist, I can't do much about him because he's such an innocent baby angel rapist, and what can I do? How can I send him to prison? His life is so sad.
But if that teenager goes to prison, he may not be. Ever.
So one of the things that made me laugh about this particular moment is that she says, teenager, which reminds me of how the mainstream media covers black crime. They'll say teens or youths or whatever, downplaying language, and now we actually see that in this character right here. And she's like, he'll never be okay, ever. And that's really sad, because what will happen to him if I don't have this guy prosecuted? I mean, he'll get back out on the streets and commit more and more rapes, and more people will be victimized due to your actions because you refuse to testify against him. But we should focus on on their sad life because, oh my god, what an innocent baby angel rapist. How could we even think about prosecuting him? Now look, I do want to tell you guys that in the full episode of this particular TV series, this character eventually identifies the perpetrator in the courtroom, and presumably there's a happy ending.
That's him. Jay Watson.
But white guilt cannot and should not dictate my client's actual guilt.
Objection.
I made a mistake. There are so many people in prison who don't deserve to be there.
How sure are you that Jay Watson isn't just another one of them?
The only thing I am sure about, Mr. Carter, is that your client raped me.
Also, I want to remind you that this was not the only instance of absurd, ridiculous propaganda being put forward right here, because it turns out that this privileged white woman of privilege who has the luxury of dealing with her rape by going to therapy because she has money, not the innocent angel, actually has an adopted black brother, and when she was a kid, they stole something from the convenience store and they gave her a warning because they were like, your white privilege protects you, while they sent her brother to juvenile detention. Because oh my god, such a sad tale in the United States of America where we're locking up all these youthful offenders, especially in the city of New York, and we hold them without bail, even though New York has bail reform and even though retail theft is off the charts and these people keep getting released same day automatically. But back in the day, oh my god, so much evil white racism and so unfair to the black youths because she didn't get any time, but her brother got time for stealing that pack of gum, and that's a realistic scenario that definitely happened, and just trust me, it's a real thing. Now, to give you a little bit more details, before the assault against this woman, what was happening was that she was in a department store. That department store was being smashed and grabbed, robbed like we've seen a million times, and then, according to the security video, he took off his mask before coming in to assault her in the dressing room. Now, she denied seeing his face completely, trying to defend the criminal, but the videotape actually showed that he did remove his mask and she would have seen his face.
I took something I can't get back. It was just supposed to be a robbery. But when I saw her, my whole life, nobody paid attention to anything I did. Not at home, not at school. Always felt kind of invisible. You know?
Now, while the first scene that I showed you is the one that went viral, I just want to point out that this scene is even funnier. This kid, who was denying it the whole time, about to beat the charges possibly, decides after the woman testifies that he needs to come into the district attorney's office and strike a plea bargain, beg for mercy because now he's been redeemed. So it turns out the woke lady who wanted to rehabilitate the innocent angel black youth in fact turned that man into an innocent angel black youth. Yeah, that's what actually happens in the episode. It's even more absurd than what is being portrayed online. Now look, a lot of people just play that clip that I showed you out of context. They don't tell you that eventually throughout the course of the series, the individual does identify the attacker, he does get convicted of the crime, and there is supposed to be a happy resolution. And the moral of this episode is that these woke idiots who are trying to protect the minorities should not do so. They should identify their attackers and they should face the consequences for those attacks. But the thing is, I also want to point out that this isn't really on Law and Order for putting this type of character in there, because they like to do a lot of things that are ripped directly from the headlines. And one of the things that we can notice in the United States of America and in Europe is similar kind of actions from the victims of crime. How many stories have we heard in Europe of sexual assaults by migrants where people didn't want to report their migrant because they didn't want that person to get deported back to Syria or deported back to whatever Middle Eastern country? In the United States of America, we have similar things. There is an attitude that is developing among wealthy white progressives that it's improper to call the police on black people, and this is why one of the biggest predictors of whether or not you will support defund the police is whether or not you have an income over $100,000, because largely black people, to the tune of 81%, do not support cutting the police budget. it. They either want to increase it or keep it the same. This is a policy of the wealthy elite. This is a luxury belief. She talked about how she had the luxury for therapy, but in reality, people tend to adopt these positions because they have the luxury of not living in neighborhoods that are plagued by crime. They never have to deal with this, yet they donate to candidates that support these criminal justice reforms, and they support them at the ballot box and back them up because they live in such safe bubbles that they never actually have to interact with the police or have to rely on the police in situations like this. So in reality, while people want to come down hard on Law Order SVU, they're actually reflecting the real world. They're actually showing us what is going on in our country right now. There's an ever-growing movement of people that want to make excuses for criminals, and a perfect example of what I'm talking about is that recent murder that we talked about on this channel, where the girlfriend of the person who was murdered not only started a GoFundMe to get herself money because she wanted to profit off of it, never mentioned the funeral of her boyfriend, but she also picked the wrong guy in a police photo lineup, and multiple reports are making the case that she is not cooperating with the police because she was an ACAB, defund the police are all racist, Antifa type, and she was willing to let the murderer of her boyfriend, who stabbed him in the heart as he laid down on the pavement and bled out in front of her, get off on a crime just because he's black, and therefore he is entitled to be able to stab whoever the hell he wants. That guy even walked up to her, spat in her face, and threatened to kill her. Thankfully there's video, thankfully there's other witnesses to get that guy off the streets, because a dangerous young man who happens to be black is somehow a victim of society and should be allowed to stab whatever white person he wants. So yeah, the scary thing about this Law & Order scene is not that Law & Order, the known to be pro-police show, has now gotten so woke that they're defending the black rapist. It's that Law & Order is still, just as much as ever, art imitating life, because this is a growing attitude across the Western world where you don't hold certain people accountable for their crimes, for their violations of the rules, depending on their innate characteristics, depending on whether or not they're quote unquote historically marginalized. This woman right here, as stupid and clunky and ridiculous and absurd as she sounds, actually exists. We have seen case after case, not just in the United States of America, but across the Western world, where people don't want to do what's right. They don't want to put the criminal behind bars because they think about the sad sack life that the criminal has, and that progressive poison has gotten into their minds. So I know a lot of people want to rage out about this particular episode, but again, watch the episode. The moral of the episode is that you should testify against your rapist, obviously. The moral of the episode is that, you know what, it doesn't really matter that much where you grew up or about your stupid story about the black kid going to juvenile detention because he stole gum that I don't believe. What actually matters is the fact that this person committed the crime, he will commit it again, and you should prosecute that individual. And our heroes in the story, the people that you follow from episode to episode, convince her to ID him. They convince her of that fact because that's what matters. But in reality, in a lot of cases, just like the elevated conviction rate, when somebody refuses to testify against their attacker, that person walks free. That person is out among us. That person has no criminal record, just an arrest record, and it's only a matter of time before they commit the crime again. It's only a matter of time before somebody else is victim. Too many times have we seen these kind of circumstances happen. Too many times have we seen the woke progressive ideology aid the criminal, perpetuate their crime spree, allow them to reoffend again, claim more and more victims until eventually somebody takes a stand. So if you want to take a lesson from this, don't be like, Law and Order went woke. Oh my God, Law and Order so woke. Take the lesson that it is on you, it is incumbent on you to go after the criminal, to hold them to account, to make sure that they face consequences, and to push for the culture to move back into that mindset where we don't side with them, we don't pretend that they're Aladdin, we don't pretend that this guy committed a rape in order to feed his starving family. We acknowledge them for the deviant behavior that they exhibit and the threat that they pose to society. But hey, Those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about this Law Order SVU episode. Till next time.